Hello, and welcome to Lessons Learned from Real-World Edge Deployments. I'm Maxi, VP of Business Development here at Zadata. And in this session, you're going to learn from practitioners about their experience deploying edge solutions. We're also going to try and highlight some challenges to expect from both a technology and a corporate perspective, and any suggestions for accelerating timelines for your projects. We heard earlier today in one of the sessions, there was a quote around like how many of these edge projects that are POCs turn into production, and the consensus of the group was less than 50%. So the folks on this call have managed to navigate that and got to the real world, and they're going to share a bit of their experiences. So please help me welcome these three folks. We have Obi, who's the Chief Software Architect for Production at SLB, formerly known as Schlumberger. We have Peter, who's the Chief Product Owner for Switch Automation. And we have Dan, who's head of global AI and machine learning solutions at Atos. So let's see. Obi, let's start with you. Can you, maybe briefly describe your edge project or projects and try and quantify some of the value they've brought?
Yes, thanks, Maxi. Thanks for inviting me to the call. So I think we're going to have fun today. So my name is Obinna Ilochon, or just Obi for short. I'm a software and IoT architect for SLB, a global technology company where we drive energy innovation for a balanced planet. Many of you will know us by our old name, Schlumberger, the largest oil and gas service company in the world. We have since then expanded significantly into providing technology and services for new and alternative energy and for sustainability initiatives. I've been in Schlumberger for about 23 years now, and I spent most of my career developing digital technologies for use at the well site and software in data centers, which we now call the edge and the cloud. These technologies have had a significant impact, whether it's by ensuring a pump is running in its sweet spot, or predicting hydrate formation or corrosion in pipes before it happens and taking appropriate action, or even optimizing the run life of equipment in processing facilities, or reducing human visits to the well site, which is both a safety and a carbon footprint issue. With the advent of IoT, we've gone further to make our edge more deployable, more intelligent, more autonomous, and then finally more secure. The characteristics of our edge are a bit different than other edge deployments. We deploy to the far edge, the far edge. We deploy to the desert, to the middle of the jungle, offshore, or manned locations. And so our software has to work in sometimes harsh conditions with poor and sporadic network. We also deploy to an industry that has a low tolerance for failure or downtime, or even an appetite to babysit or troubleshoot software. So no matter how cool we geeks think our software is, or what fancy IoT name we give it, if it does not work the way it's supposed to, the field engineer will disconnect the edge gateway and use it as a footstool. So in my career, I've really discovered that humans are more tolerant of other humans making mistakes than of software. So our software has to have a higher bar. It's been a challenge, but the rewards around increased productivity, efficiency, safety, carbon footprint reduction are also huge. Even something as simple as sending an alarm that some wells in a far-flung location are down, or even better, about to go down, has led to decrease in deferred production loss, reduction in maintenance costs, and improved safety and carbon reduction by reducing the number of boots required to visit the well site and for inspection or rework. So with the introduction of smarter compute, ML on the edge, computer vision, we are just scratching the surface of what we can do on the edge. So I could talk all day about this, but I want to give some time to my other colleagues. So hand you over to.
Super helpful. I love that quote. Humans have higher tolerance for other humans than for software. And I think I live that every day. So can completely relate. Cool. How about you, Peter? Can we hear a little bit about your background in edge projects?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Maxi. And Obi, that was some good similarities there in that in what we do. So yeah, Peter Rake, I'm Chief of Product here at Switch Automation. Our predominantly we're a data analytics platform for commercial real estate. So we've very much find ourselves doing similar things to what Obi described, but we're doing it in the commercial real estate environment. My background is integrations. I spend a lot of time at Schneider Electric as a solutions architect and have been at Switch 10 years, actually just this year, 10 years, doing what we do with connectivity into buildings. So I think for our edge projects, we're solving a lot of the similar things that Obi described, where we're connecting into building systems. But I think adoption of technology in commercial real estate has been slow to adapt. I don't think there's the emphasis on downtime and the cost of that, and realizing that because we aren't in the jungle. Like Obi said, we're actually in built up environments where there is humans that typically do that. But what we're seeing and where we're providing value is not only breaking down the silos of building systems, I think particularly with COVID and buildings being less occupied than they have ever been, this is where the value is actually, really starting there. We were up against it, I think, before COVID with adoption of tech into commercial real estate. It's a very noisy space. Building management systems kind of take the headline often, but IoT has enabled us to now bring together, it's broken down a lot of the barriers to entry on collecting more data about the utilization of your asset. So now we've got people counting, we've got landlords that are particular about indoor air quality. So what's my environment that I'm walking into? How's my utility costs look versus the people that are actually in my building? So now we're able to unify all that data in one place, whereas historically that's typically been very siloed. So if you want to see, if you did invest in people counting, you might have looked at people counting in isolation. Great. Well, what does that tell me about how my building systems and my chiller is running? And so this is where we've actually been able to provide value. So not only being able to proactively maintain, because it's a very reactive space on fix and repairs, so we're able to proactively look at degradation of equipment performance. But then when we're looking at occupancy versus utility consumption, can I do something about that now? I've only got 5 people in my building on a Friday. Do we really need to bring on all our chillers and our whole infrastructure? So that's where we're seeing that. And this edge deployment, obviously, into the buildings. We also have to obviously then respect and accommodate to IT and cybersecurity, because again, the OT, the operational technology space, had been neglected for many, many years, and it's actually now come to the fore and is the responsibility of a lot of the IT teams now as well.
That's really interesting. And the COVID's driving kind of different use cases and combining technologies. It makes a ton of sense. I mean, there's a bunch of empty buildings out there, like why fill them full of lunch and chill them down? Excellent. Cool. All right, Dan, let's hear from you as well, please.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys noticed I dropped off for a few seconds. It's because,
yeah, congratulations making it back.
Yeah, my hotel Wi-Fi failed, even though I paid extra. And I'm now on a Verizon ultra wideband 5G. So, I mean, there you go. So, so my role at Atos, I run the Americas for the edge deployment and artificial intelligence solutions. So everything that from, I would say, full stack, everything from the hardware deployed at the edge all the way up to the data scientists creating the use cases and then the user interface for that. So, we've got a lot of experience across verticals. So everybody's dipping their toe in this some way. Some industries are kind of advanced, especially the IoT type industries like oil and gas and early on, I think a lot of those physical environments had a lot of innovation going on. So I think the main customer, that we've really got success in has been globally public with the things that we're doing has been Disney. So Disney Parks and Atos have a pretty strong relationship. We've solved a number of their use cases, and they're almost all edge based. So I think the last I heard from the what's called the rides, basically uptime environment, how long your rides are available. It's a use case that's pretty specific and easy to consume because rides equal runs equals number of people equals tickets. And so the jump from how much is this use case worth to me to how much does this use case cost is really simple in their mind. So I think that helps having a definition to that effect. And also they're just really sophisticated or have been around IoT devices, where to put them, how they've been doing things in the past. And so that project, it's aggregating about 180 billion IoT generated things every hour. So it's got MPP databases in the back end. It's got aggregators and gateways everywhere. And we're basically attacking one by one every ride as it equates, and then obviously global. And then we have to create a global data warehouse for that sits in the cloud. So it's kind of a multi-cloud, multi-edge example. But I would say that they're pretty strong and innovative. And the key drivers there for that success was they knew their ROI before they started. They knew what the cost was of not being on those rides, and they started aggregating the data years ago, right? They can get to the predictive maintenance because they have the predictive data. So I think that's important.
Cool. Very interesting. Super interesting. Okay. Well, we heard earlier today, a lot of these edge projects aren't successful. I'm curious, as you, and maybe Peter, let's start with you on this one. What would you tell a new edge practitioner about to, start this journey, start a POC, start to go build an edge project? Like, what are some of the lessons learned or best practices you would maybe tell our audience?
Well, yeah, particularly in our space, like I said earlier, the adoption of tech for this space has been its challenge in its own right, because I think that the ownership of the devices on the edge was a third party, which was kind of shocking to us when we got into that. So really, for me, I think that the lessons learned from this is to really, own that internally, and that's where we're seeing the more maturity of our customers who have actually introduced and probably forced, I guess, IT and OT teams, the operations tech teams, to get along with their IT teams, because historically that was oil and water. And that was one of the things that we've been able to do, is educate. I think that's the biggest thing. There's probably that, is to really educate the landlord that this is your asset, this is your building and your infrastructure. So the people, I think, where they get a bit paranoid, cyber puts a bit of fear into, oh wow, we don't want to be that next headline. But I think it's really about educating that operations tech it's not that scary. It's not printers and laptops. It's actually about informing, why we want the connectivity. And Dan, what you just captured there on Disney, that's what we've got to have. This is our business. This data coming out of these, should be treated as an asset. So I feel like there's a massive education piece there, Maxi, for the teams to understand why this box is going onto the network, and then it's in that management. And I think that was foreign to the teams there. A building management system connected to the internet. Why do you want to do that? It's the same, and it was probably the same early days of Disney. Why do we want to connect rides? Why do we need that data on the internet? And that's what it is now. We're actually seeing that value. So for me, big piece of it's education. It's also getting the business to support that as well, because if the business doesn't support it, then you're actually setting yourself up for failure as well. So that's I think my lessons learned from deploying into the edge.
Cool. So Obi, I mean, to summarize, it's like get everybody on board, make sure people know the value from day one, and kind of educate them all. Obi, I think SLB's taken even a bigger step where they have sort of a true edge practice. So I'd love to hear your answer to this question around what do you tell new practitioners, and what have you guys learned over sort of your long history of doing innovation at the edge?
Yeah, I'll add two more things to what Peter said. So first one for us is coolness does not sell in oil and gas, right? Cool tech is good for your house, your Apple Watch, Facebook. That doesn't sell, right? What sells is solving real problems. So we sit down in a lab and we design fancy ML models. It has to solve a problem. So the main advice I'll have is really find a problem that needs to be solved. Even if it's simple, make sure you're able to solve that, and make sure you're able to deploy that reliably. If it doesn't work, the field engineer will ditch it the first day. Yep. The second one is also about scalability, right? So again, we pride ourselves in developing cool tech, but once you pass 10 deployments, 50, 80, there's no way to manage that. So we have to learn how to treat this edge deployment just the same way IT treats our mobile devices, our laptops. It has to be managed at scale. It has to be secure, or else, again, it will be thrown away the first day. So those are the two things I would kind of push to anybody who is starting on this journey. We started with our cool tech, and we learned the hard way that we need to make sure that whatever we push out there has to be deployed at scale.
Very cool. Dan?
Yeah, and I'd say I'd kind of piggyback on that, the clearly defining the boundaries of ROI. So in software startups, we kind of got this early on because you have limited resources to go out there and do POCs over and over and over. So you have to figure out what the success criteria is. And I think one of the things within the business is that, especially in edge-based use cases, you're solving something that's incremental. You're not building Uber. You're incrementally changing something within their organization. And unless they understand the value of that, they get bored. They're literally like, okay, so I am working on this over and over, and you've been working on it for 2 months. I don't clearly know how it's part of my system. Is it going to save me $5? Is it going to change my supply chain in 10 minutes? So I think that coming up with that success criteria of what does it look like to be successful to you before you ever start is very important for moving on to the next incremental project within that organization. So I think that's one of them. The second thing is setting expectations. Every CTO and CIO is out there watching predictive maintenance videos and figuring out how like digital twin is going to change their lives and all this stuff. And then they realize when we get in there and we're like, oh, we have all this cool software that does the detections on anomaly detection on time series data and all these things, they don't have any historical data. So when you get in there, like, if there's no historical data, we can't predict anything for you. And so they're like, well, yes, you can. You said you have a predictive maintenance solution. We're like, well, you haven't stored anything to date. So we've tried to circumvent that with in some ways. Disney's a good example of taking what used to be maintenance records, physical maintenance records, sending them through like OCR and NLP scanners just to get history, because there's no physical history from the PLCs. But that's what I'd say is really setting expectations of what they're expecting to get out of what you're building, and show them, you know, it's not what you saw on the internet. It's not the coolest thing, but it is going to get you there eventually.
Interesting. Yeah, a couple of you guys touched on like time to value. Like, you know, if it takes forever, your users are going to walk away. If it doesn't work, if it's cool tech and it doesn't help them, they're going to walk away. So that's super interesting. The data piece is also interesting. Like, I guess what I'm hearing is start collecting your data now. If you're going to do an edge project and you want to do any sort of AI or analytics there, start collecting your data today. So maybe that's a great takeaway. Okay, Dan, let's start with you on this one. You know, what would you say are some of the challenges your customers bump into that like maybe weren't anticipated? And, you know, like, what are some of the surprises people should maybe start to plan for, given, you know, sort of your experience looking at a bunch of different edge projects?
I mean, you just spoke on it, right? It's if the use case and the business value is going to be realized, then you have to use the data in some way. And if you don't have the data, it's hard to do that. So yeah, when you're starting out, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in logistics, if you're in a lot of these areas, when you're looking at buying like a Fanuc robotic arm, can you buy it with the data stream, or you can buy it without the data stream? So there's things within those manufacturing devices, you know, the PLCs, some are made by US made manufacturing PLCs, but a lot of stuff in the US is being manufactured with Chinese PLCs. There's no conversion book for Chinese PLCs. So like when you start to see, hey, do you have the data you need to see if this actuator or this, you know, conveyor belt is going to give me the data to see when it's going to fail? They don't know that until they start looking around and they realize they don't have a conversion to figure out what it means when it comes out of the PLC. So that data is really important. And that means not just in manufacturing, but also, and we talked about this in earlier sessions, computer vision. So computer vision is a big aspect of where we focus now. And that's because we're looking at the multifaceted aspect of AI. So if you look at the difference between GPT-3 and GPT-4, you can Google it. It's really the injection of different types of media. So it's not just about text. Now it's in taking images, it's taking videos, right? It's taking audio. Videos, audio actually matter. So chatter within a manufacturing environment actually matters. It can predict the failure of something. Chatter inside of, inside of oil and gas matters too, especially when you're using sonar and things like that. So that data is important. So you just have to educate them on where the data is going to be and how you can collect it. And that really helps out. So.
Cool. Obi, how about you? What were the challenges and, you know, what was surprising as you sort of walk through this edge deployment?
I mean, there are obvious challenges many people have. The one that really just smacked us in the face was regulatory compliance. You know, so you deploy, you engineer your edge software. It works in the lab. It's great, and it's all systems go right. Wrong. You know, you need to deploy this to Venezuela, to Russia, to Europe, and each of these countries have different certification regulatory compliance requirements. And so, you know, this causes severe delays actually, and it caused severe delays for us. So one of the lessons learned for us, the challenge was we start early, you know, mapping out the different locations you're going to be deploying to, and making sure that you're starting to, use facilities in those locations to make sure that whatever you're importing into that location complies to the regulations of the country. So even things like cryptography, the kind of modems you're using, you know, sometimes even the paint on your gateway box, it's impacted. So that was kind of the most surprising one for us. Another one that was surprising for some of our developers was just latency. So again, you deploy your edge software in the lab, it works okay because you have 10 to 12 milliseconds latency. Deploy that over a satellite feed, you're talking about 750 milliseconds. So imagine having to do a round trip of about 30 calls. We deployed one of the gateways to the field once, and we waited for about 20 minutes for it to start, and that was just because of all the back and forth. So we had to re-engineer and make it less less chatter, so that you can, it works over a satellite feed. And the third one is about hardware, right? So we all swallow the Kool-Aid about the cloud. The cloud is someone else's hardware. Well, guess what? The edge is your hardware, right? So you need to make sure you select it, you select the right one, make sure you test it, you bake it, you fry it, make sure it works. Because again, if it doesn't work, the field engineer will toss it away. Right? So those are the biggest challenges for us that we saw.
Cool. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, again, like we've touched on here, is that our use case, it's not really the tech. It's actually the biggest challenge was actually the humans that were involved in some of the decisions. It's because it's like, why do I want to do that? Like Dan sort of said, like, okay, it's and people don't understand it, which is a little surprising, but not. I like what Obi said about cool tech. People see if it's cool tech and then they'll adopt it personally. But when it comes to the business world and data, it's still shocking how many people don't really understand internet and data in 2023, and that's what some of our challenges are, is that we're connecting this box and it's perceived as a germ on a network, because IT, there's all that fear of cyber, and what are we going to hack here? It's not. This is actually an approach. It's part of what we've built. We've built this secure box to gather data, and then it's why would you do it? I think also some of the challenges in commercial real estate is that the budgets are at the building, so it's often not an enterprise solution. So that's a unique challenge, I think, in our space, particularly because it's not a single organization driving it necessarily. It's often there because there's other stakeholders involved. And I think the surprising one was what we talked about on the last point, was the surprising piece was we don't know where to connect to. That's a third party that connects there. So same as when we integrate people counting, or we do indoor air quality, or we do Wi-Fi analysis on connected devices. Yeah, everyone is dependent on this other third party, and they can't get a cohesive solution together. So there's no real strategy driving from the business to solve it. You're often then talking to all these third parties, and then there's again, human nature. Oh, so why do you want that data? It's, well, hey, the organization wants this data. It's their data, and that's our posture to it all, right? You've invested in this equipment that's going to produce data, and you want access to it. So that's probably the ones that stand out for me.
Cool. And I'll open this up to anyone, I guess. What would you do differently in your next deployment? Dan, you want to start?
Sure. I mean,
a different one, so you probably have a few questions to think through. But
I think one of the things that I always, when my customer asks me what the reference architecture is for Edge, I kind of laugh. And it's a hard thing to do, because we're used to building out what's the right way to do things, and there is no right way to do Edge right now. And part of that is because of the complications of where should everything happen. And when 5G was introduced, they introduced another component. It's called the MEC, right? The MEC is another layer between us and the cloud that does processing. And so they're addressing our customers, well, like, you should be moving everything in your environment to the MEC, and we'll serve it to you in 5G. Well, some things have lower latency than that. Some things don't. So you've got one guy over here from telco talking to him about the MEC, and then you've got another guy over here talking to him about doing embedded and trying to figure out how to do robotics. And then you've got somebody saying we can do it on gateways, another guy saying you can do it on 5G. And so the complication of all that really is a struggle for a lot of us. And one of the dependencies we have at the real use cases at the edge is the business applications that you can leverage that are already installed. So that means, an environment that is managing your access control systems, and environments that managing your PLCs and all of your IoT data, environment that's managing the video surveillance. All of these are edge aggregators for data. And where that should sit, I think, is really important to be able to explain. I think it kind of dovetails into what the hardware architecture should look like, and being able to describe that. But finding partnerships that are strong is important in this, because being able to provide the hardware as a turnkey solution is important for a lot of the organizations that don't have an idea of what it means to provide value. Logistics is the biggest growth market right now that I've seen in Edge. And they've never done data warehousing. They've never done data engineering. They're like, what do you, just plot me a box. That box should do everything you need it to do. And then I want to see a dashboard. And so when you ask that, it's like, well, there's a lot of fingers in that pie. So I don't know if I answered any questions there. I'm just, talking about some of the challenges, but
I mean, these are all good lessons learned for sure. Yeah. Obi, what would you what would you do different?
Yeah, for us, again, it's not sexy, but the certification, regulatory compliance, they are boring. Tech guys don't like to hear that because it's lots and lots of documentation, but it's something you have to do or else you can't scale, at least internationally. The next one for us, I think Peter mentioned, is like the biggest barrier today for technical adoption is not the technology, it's humans. It's us, right? We have a hard time accepting that working well with machines. So it's really about making sure that when we deploy these applications to the world site or the edge, we need to make sure that we carry the users along. Early adapters are very good, making sure that you understand this thing is not going to replace my job. I guess sometimes they will, but it's supposed to help augment them. It's supposed to make them superheroes. Yeah. And so by making sure that they buy into it as early as possible, it's one of the things that I would do differently if I just start again. It's not about just developing the best tool in the lab. It's about making sure that this is going to help the person on the well site and making sure that they are willing to adopt it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's almost like building a product. Like you need to talk to your customers and figure out what their needs are. You can't just build it in isolation and hope they buy it. Yeah, very similar.
I think that's what I'd go off the back of what Dan was saying there on the complexities of all the stakeholders that you have. Often too many cooks in the kitchen. So I think what I'd do differently is say no more often. If you're not ready, like this is not going to be good. I think we touched on it on our first bullet point. There is that really is that if you're not ready for this and the business isn't committed to all the value propositions that we will give to you, like your point on machine learning, Dan, I get that every day. Oh, so you don't do machine learning? Well, give me your history and we can absolutely. But so I think, yeah, if we had said no to some other opportunities, we've got a really good core set of customers that are kind of the 1%ers. They have the business is backing it. They've got the right subject matter experts. They understand the value of data that's and another asset of their business, just like their sales revenue, just like every other aspect of the business. This is now their operational data and how best could we use our assets. So they are our perfect ones. And then we've got people that sort of go to the next shiny thing and go, oh, this looks cool, but I've got no infrastructure to put it on. And I think that's where we've helped them. But we're not a consulting business. But then you get brought into consulting, you pour a whole lot of time into it and it's underwhelming. So that's probably what I'd do differently, is probably say no a little more often.
And I would actually jump onto that consulting aspect. So as a technology division, we jump into the project, we try and POC it, we show them the value as fast as possible, but the stickiness matters. And the stickiness has a lot to do with, can you translate what you did into something I understand? And so something that I wouldn't say we're on the cusp of it, but we're starting to use it, and we're also starting to respect it. And that is business process automation. So there's tools out there now that essentially allow you to WYSIWYG your business processes. They measure those business processes. You can measure successes against those business processes, whether or not it's a process change, a people change, all different types of things within those. And that actually allows us to show the business, this is what we're presenting to you today. This is what you do today. Look how it works. And they're like, oh, I've never written that down before. It's great that somebody did that work. And then you pick a piece and you say, okay, this piece is going to do, we're going to replace it with a technology. That technology is either going to automate a person out, it's either going to help that person, or maybe it's going to do some machine learning. And if we pick a specific piece of that process, they know what that process did. Now we can say, hey, that process is now 2 minutes faster. This chain, the chain of events that gets you from the supply in the warehouse to out of the warehouse, is 2 minutes faster. At scale, that matters. So almost every one of my customers now, I work with a company called Iterop, which is also a French company that does business process automation, and they have a tool. And they've been helping really just describe it. And I've got a retail customer, and they're basically implementing business process automation for just receiving. So I got something at the back of the store. How are we going to receive those goods? What's the shrink value look like? Where are all these different things going? And just being able to visualize that shows them that, well, if you add computer vision into this with a mobile device, and I'm doing chain of custody verification, you guys know what that is because you get when you see a guy take a picture every time he drops a package off from Amazon, that's chain of custody verification with computer vision. So essentially, it allows us to show that value. Once you've picked one use case and shown a very small incremental value, you get to go on to the next. So you really, like I said, consulting firms, I started my career in consulting, but now they just look like overhead. They're not. In this case, they're really going to show us, they're going to be able to show your customer, hey, let's do this in steps, and you're going to see small incremental value in steps. And in aggregate, that's going to change your entire business. And that's digital transformation, right?
Super interesting. Okay, cool. Let's talk about security. I mean, obviously, fundamental always comes up. You know, Obi, you talked about compliance, and that's part of security, but you also talked about like you run in the cloud and you don't own the hardware, you run on the edge, it's your hardware, you need to secure it as well. So can you share a little bit about like, you know, how much time you spent on security, how you think about security, like, and you know, how people should think about that as they start their projects?
Yeah, so security is a big part for Schlumberger because at least for Schlumberger, the software is just a small part of the whole ecosystem. So the software, and it's helping with the drilling process. The software is helping with the production process. So the software is just a minimal part. But if that is hacked, if that is compromised, then you know everything fails. So I've been in a location where I went to a facility. It took me about 20 minutes to get through the gates. It took me a while to sign up for my badge. I had to go through special approval to get into the control room. And guess what? In the control room, someone had a laptop that was hooked up to the internet and hooked up to the control device. So, you know, with the oil and gas before industry has really been used to achieving security by isolation. You have a nice house and a nice building, and you lock it up and you're secure. With the introduction of the internet to that OT center, all of a sudden, all bets are off. A kid in his basement can stop and start your pump remotely. So for us in Schlumberger, you know, for our edge gateway, it's zero trust. We don't trust the edge gateway. Doesn't trust other humans. It doesn't trust devices. It doesn't trust the internet. It's basically assumed everybody's out there to hack it, and we start with that foundation, and then we build on top of that. So we have security embedded all the way from manufacturing. You know, we make sure it's tamper-proof when it gets to the well site. It calls home and make sure that nothing has kind of been implanted or that's not supposed to be there. We have our developers go through security training. The security reviews we do are part of the development process. We don't leave it till after. The security starts from the design stage, from the all the way through architecting, implementing, and testing. We try and get away from passwords. You'll be surprised how many applications or servers today on the website have had username admin or ABC, right? So for us, it's really huge, and Schlumberger is a very security conscious company. And we take that to the extreme sometimes for good reasons, because we have deep pockets and people will come after us if we are not, if we're hacked.
Interesting. Peter, how about you? What's your security thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much aligned with that because we took it seriously from day one. And a lot of our, like I said, our top tier 1% clients also take it seriously. You know, it's put into the business. Their operations team and their IT teams are, you know, as one. So yeah, so we've done the same. You know, we're taking it very seriously because it is a big deal. We probably don't have the same deep pockets like that, but it's a very credible device. You know, we have, you know, top tier Fortune 50 companies that are our clients, and we've gone through all of their penetration tests and security rigor that they have in their business. So, you know, to be able to perform in those environments and to get the sign off from those, you know, Fortune 50 companies, then yeah, so we've always taken it seriously from day one. The same, no remote access. I mean, that's the archaic way that some of the businesses have been before, where you're port forwarding to building management systems, and that's just not acceptable in this day and age.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say I'm the guy that probably will ask for forgiveness later when it comes to security. So
yeah, the guy we hate. Huh?
I work with the business a lot. You know, it's time to value, attention span, all that, and I'm like, okay, so what's the minimum amount we can do for security? But that has a lot to do with different parts of the sales cycle. When you're trying to prove a value, trying to get things going as fast as possible because you have their attention, that's when we leverage things like 5G, where we can plop an appliance on site. We can show a business value with augmented reality glasses and an edge computer doing some computer vision or something to that effect. And we don't have to connect back to the network. So the reason they do that is because a lot of our customers at the distribution centers or even in field vehicles, they don't want to have to go through the process of getting sign off before they see if something's valuable. And because it can take forever and start side of some of these large companies. So we've been able to kind of isolate that down. But I mean, Atos has one of the largest cyber consulting practices in the world. So as soon as I identify an opportunity and as soon as it's in Salesforce, I have a guy ask me when security is coming in. So I never forget them because I know they're coming, but we have managed data response, we have endpoint detection, all those things get installed in the production environments. But like I said, there's a lot to be said for landing something in isolation. We used to do it in data warehousing and big data, right? It's like, don't connect to the network. Let's get some sample sets, show it to them, get that business sign off and get them excited. And then we'll go back and do the architecture. But like I said, we have our own strategy around security, and a lot of it has to do with some of that endpoint detection. But I would say that there's another element to a lot of this not just in IoT, but in the other computer vision, and that's the governance. So there's a lot of governance that has to happen around data stewardship. So it's easy when you're talking about data that's coming off of machines and data that's potentially coming out of other systems that are on site. But when you start talking about the computer vision aspects of it, talk about audio or text and video, then there's all these new basically vulnerability points in data governance that you have to address. So data governance for us is pretty important, even outside of the IoT, security.
Yeah, interesting. So we had a question come in on the chat. So how do you deal with high frequency data on the edge? I'm not sure who to direct that to, but someone want to take a swag at that?
Yes. We again, with Somogy, we have a plethora of sensors and devices, and some are high frequency and some are low frequency. But for us, it's really about the decision loop, right? So you need to be able to make decisions on the data you're getting in the time enough that it's going to be sufficient for the control to go back. So for scenarios where we need to send large chunks of, where we acquire data on the edge, and we a lot of times downsample it to send it to the cloud, because the cloud doesn't need as much data to be able to make decisions. And so what we're doing is we're really putting a lot of intelligence, moving a lot of intelligence from the cloud to the edge, so we can actually make decisions on the edge and not need to send all the high frequency data to the cloud. So that's one way we deal with it, is really by moving intelligence to the edge. And then sometimes we need to send data to the cloud, but we just send data to the cloud as needed. Interesting.
Cool. Kind of the age-old problem of moving the CPU to the data, things we've been doing for the last 20 years of computing.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, so inference is really solving for that. So like one of the things that inference allows you to do is allows you to isolate that down with intention, right? Trying to figure out what the thresholds are going to be, what you care about. And that's why, sometimes GPUs, CPUs at the edge help do the data siloing so that it can go up to the cloud without sending everything.
Cool. So we're hitting the end of time. I'm going to try and summarize some of the stuff I heard. I think what I heard was, start collecting your data now. If you're thinking about edge, start collecting data. It's going to be valuable down the road. Get all your people on board early. That includes the end users are going to have to, use these solutions, but the business, your security teams, solve a real problem, validate it's a problem, and then go deliver that. Let's see, we talked about, don't forget compliance, especially international rules and regulations, and, like making sure you can actually deploy in these countries once you've sort of built the solution. And there's a statement about, security by isolation doesn't work on the edge. We can't build firewalls and expect it to be safe. So zero trust becomes important, things like that. So good stuff, great feedback. Really, thank you very much to all the speakers. At this point, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and the sessions will begin again around 1 p.m. Pacific time. We have 2 sessions in the business side. We're going to talk about edge investment and sort of the landscape from an investment perspective. And on the technical side, it's the role of open source and edge computing. So you can find those links in the dashboard. I want to thank my panelists. You guys did an awesome job. And thanks to everybody who attended. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. It was great. See you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.